Today, we're going to be looking at some of the most aggressive defense matches that I've seen all DECODE season and some really creative robot mechanisms. We're going to see a lot of defense in here, and I think this is a good example of some pre-season aggression. I'm Coach Pratt, and I've been teaching robotics design for over a decade now, and I've mentored FTC teams to winning national championships. And today, we're going to look at some really impressive autonomouses and talk about some different autonomous metas that are starting to develop amongst some teams, some really clever, close looks at different mechanisms, a couple interesting new base strategies you might want to try out, and then we'll analyze really intense defense played game here, just to talk about what your team might be facing in their qualifying tournaments. So first up here in auto, we've got Turtle Walkers, and they have a 15 autonomous for artifacts. So let's take a look. They're able to fire the first 3, come on up, grab the next 3, fire another 3, and then do another. And it looks like they're not capable of indexing, but it's possible their strategy is just to go for a much higher throughput. The reason I want to highlight this robot at the end here is not because of those massive shakes, but I want you to watch what it does now. So it comes up to grab those other 3 that are in the corner. And depending on how quick this thing is able to go, it does have the potential for it to, depending on where that time is and how quickly it can fire those balls, they may even be able to get an additional 3 as time goes by, because they might be able to go up into that human layer zone, building an additional 3. But in any case, super, super impressive work. You'll have this going so quickly as it's running around and be able to fire. It almost looks like it starts to fire a little bit as it's moving as well. And I do wonder, well, for solo match, totally fine. I think this would really play well with autonomous from some of the other players as well and what their other human player is doing. So nice job on this Turtle Walkers. Something really impressive and really taking that own it strategy on your intake as well. So nice work there. Next up, we've got team 21689. And I wanted to share this auto here just because I really like their intake. I think it's quite impressive. They've got color sensing on here. So they have a 9 intake auto, but on top of that, it's capable of indexing that sensor. So we can see that it goes to pick up another couple, comes around, spins them around on the inside, and then is able to launch them up for that sensor intake there. So really cool work on that one. We can see it's got quite a bit. One thing I do want to highlight on here is take a look at just how bright it is on the inside of their robot. And what a lot of people don't realize is just how sensitive color sensors are to light as you're trying to run these things around. So having consistent lighting conditions in your robot across where your color sensor is will really improve the reliability of your color sensor over time. Next up, let's take another point in auto here. This is a 17 classified auto, 18 attempted from Cosmo Bots 25679. So we can see it's able to fire in the first 3 here. And apparently they're correctly indexed, but we'll see how that goes. It looks like the first 3 were already in, for some reason, not correctly indexed, but that one is indeed correctly indexed. Starts to open up the gate there, fires in another 2. Looks like it did miss 1. It was so close. And then they're just going into the loading zone just to be able to grab. At this point, it looks like, well, the index does fall apart a little bit here because now you're just going in the human zone. So I think this is something to consider as you are running into these high-performing autonomouses, that clearly teams are capable of getting to a point where they can fire so many balls through that they actually aren't sure that they're capable of picking up the correct order of the index with just how quickly and just how high this throughput is. So it's going to be really interesting. I could see in some of these high-class sections that you have one robot in these 30 seconds able to get 17 artifacts in by themselves, so they're actually going to end up hooping themselves out of pattern points for that ranking point because they're having such a high throughput going through this system. And it's going to be really interesting to see how teams decide to go into that pattern point. Now, I wonder, and teams may have not gotten into programming this, and this is a bit of a pontification thing, how are teams going to manage if they don't pick up the correct colored balls in the order that they need to be able to get that pattern for those? I think that ranking point is going to be really important on that. And I think in the qualifier, they'll just throw that all out the window for the most part and just go for a higher throughput. in the playoff section. When it comes to the qualifier section, I think it's going to be really important to get that ranking point because it does make it more likely for you to be able to go through in those playoffs because those ranking points really do matter. So are we going to start seeing strategies where teams are going to start ejecting balls if it's not able to put it through the correct order so they can really focus on that pattern? Maybe at the start it doesn't matter so much, but especially if you're going to go into that kind of open zone where you're not sure what's going to be coming up, you might have to come up with some sort of strategy where you're actually going to exhaust some balls or some artifacts out of your robot before you start firing it in. In any case, insanely impressive work here from Cosmonauts. That's a really cool thing to take a look at. Next up here, we've got Team X Sergio Nova FTC, and I wanted to share off their kind of cool little triple shooter here. And it's got 3 little flywheels. It's all a nice color-coded, but they're able to pick themselves up, launch 3 in a row. Really slick having 3 flywheels going up and running. And it looks like the flywheels are all attached on the same axle, so they're all running at the same speed. But you do have 3 individual launchers to be able to go in. And I wanted to show off this intake here because this intake has something similar to transfer we've seen in other points, but we've got this kind of little auger section here that we can see. So we can see as it slows in, it has a little, these are actually auger points at that last second when it pauses. We'll see it in Instagram. It is really challenging to pause at the time. But take a look at this top indexing section. No, go away, I don't want to like it. We can see this is actually an auger that is, it looks like it's a split in 2 and it's moving the balls to opposite sides so it's capable of moving in. So despite having such a shallow intake here, it's able to move it out on the side and then move them out to the sides here before it's able to kick it back in. And we can see in its performance here, it's got pretty impressive results for having 3 shooting at a time without auto. Really cool stuff. I wanted to share that out for that robot. On the other side of the auger, there is another one here from Sudbury up in my home and native land of Canada, where they've got a really cool auger transfer system. So I want to share off this team here. And we'll see as they turn to the side so we can get there. I believe that this is 22310. Yes, 22310. So we can see that they've got an auger system coming on the side here that's able to drop it in from the bottom. They have this little scoop here on the side that the human player can drop into. And then it rotates the ball up that then launches it up into their flywheel system up here that's then able to pick it up and launch it from, looks like a horizontal flywheel system. I think it's really cool to see grain augers picking these things up, flitting it around, and then moving this up. Now, presently, it looks like they're only able to hold 2. Maybe they can hold 3 if they made this little scoop just a little bit bigger to get 3 in. Pretty reliable transfer system. One thing I wonder on this is just how quick can you get that auger to be able to move it quite reliably. So you do have to human intake on this current robot. It looks like they do have the capability to intake from the ground, but perhaps that wasn't working this match. I'm not sure. In any case, I love seeing cool little engineering pieces like this. And then we can also see 16415 start to play a little bit of bully here so that they can't get those balls in on that. Cool engineering in any case. Next up here, we've got Raider Robotics FTC. I wanted to share off theirs here because I think it's a really cool system for just a small robot that is working quite well. We can see that it's got a little gate here that's able to open up and stop things from going inside, so it can clearly launch 3 through. It's got belts moving on the side. It's got a simple rubber band intake. Really simple design, works well, and I think that for a lot of, I'm not sure if this is a rookie team or if they're in their first or a couple of years of competing, but I think this is a great functional robot that I want to highlight out. That's some teams that you don't fully need custom CAD for everything to be able to get things running. Looks like they're running a rubber band intake around a couple 100 tooth gears here, which is also cool. One suggestion I will have for this team is they probably want to add some sort of side shoring up here, some sort of triangles on their main system, because that thing is racking like crazy and it'll probably make things a little bit more stable if you can bring those in. Next up, we've got some barking here. We've got Electric Mayhem Robotics. This is 12736. They've got a simple little kickstand here with just a motor and a gear, almost a bit like a cam here that's able to pitch itself up. And then the robot is heavy back balanced to one side, so that it ends up falling down the other side. This is a great way of reducing half of your system, picking yourself up with not a lot of torque being necessary. One thing I will say that they might want to do is they want to add some sort of visual marker beyond just the center of the robot for where they know that center point's going to come in, to make it very obvious to the driver where it is that they actually want to be placing themselves in at. It also looks like the center of mass is real tight to the back, so they might want to move something just a little bit closer to the back, just in case they don't have that center of mass all the way up. So we'll see, because it looks like it's real touchy on where that center mass decides it actually wants to fall back. Maybe I could be wrong. Look in the video, it does look a little bit like that in this respect. You may also want to, with teams that are going the kickstand strategy, you may also want to go on the idea of making your kickstand go a little bit higher than this current park does. And the reason I suggest that is that in the rules, you want to make it clear to the judges that there is no guess that you're fully supported by those 3 points. And if judges have to get down on the ground to be able to check your height, it will make things a little bit more challenging. So if you can get a little bit more height or offset this to the front just a little bit more, it might make it a little more clear to those judges. Despite it being a legal lift, it might be a little bit on that close side. So next up, we've got Little Potato Robotics here. And they have a great looking little same sort of idea. It's another little mechanism here to be able to lift themselves up and do a little tilt. And I think this works great for doing a little 45-degree angle. One thing that I would want to think about on this robot as this thing is rotating up, they may want to add some sort of plastic protector on the bottom of this, or some sort of rubber protector with that. It's really compact. It really does lift the robot up quite well. But I am concerned about potentially damaging the field tiles, but having such a strong pinpoint driving into the field, and with those sharp U-channel edges, judges may get you on that. And it depends how stringent of a judge you're going to get during that field test mechanism. And that would just help keep the fields a little more reliable. It's hard to tell if this is where we were also testing things earlier, if there's a big chunk out of the ground here or not. But it might help out with that one a little bit. In any case, super creative work from Little Potato Robotics there. Next up, I want to show from Team Seattle Solvers here. Just want to show you just how high the throughput is through their shooter, because it is really impressive just how quickly they can get so many balls through. It's a kind of a cool little tech demo here where you can see just how many it's capable of going through. And it looks like on the video, well, yeah, in the video, every single one is going through. So they've clearly got some sort of extra inertia being up on their flywheel. It'll be great to be able to get a close-up look at this. I believe that the Fun Robotics Network does have it behind the bot on Seattle Solvers. So you can go take a look at their video if you want to get a little more behind the scenes footage of this robot as well. My guess is that they have a little bit of extra inertia or extra weight added to that flywheel, and they probably have 2 motors powering that flywheel as well to be able to get themselves having such high throughput. I think it's really impressive, really cool work. And the last thing that we've been waiting for is talking about this really high defense match. This is from the San Jose Regional Qualifier, and this is a qualifying match here. Starting up at the Autonomous, I do want to mention this first robot here on the blue side. I believe this would have been a foul because, yes, they've gone over their opponent's half of the field and then contacted their robot as well. So you definitely want to make sure you're moving over to the left. Otherwise, you will run into some of those problems. It's good seeing robots get off the launch line. Something here, we did see it, we've talked about before, is despite a robot being able to go in and get those points to be able to launch in, because they weren't keeping track, or not keeping track, but making an autonomous path at such a point that it's less likely to be able to run where their opponent might be, they actually lost 3 points on that leave. And that's not just 3 points, it's actually moving towards that ranking point as well, because in qualifying tournaments, you need 16 leave points to be able to get that ranking point for that one. That is 2 robots leaving the launch line at the start. So this robot didn't, this robot did, this robot did, but these 2 did not. And then you also need 10 points on your base. It doesn't have to be in that combination. There could be many different combinations that can get you there, but that is an easy way of making that combination. But let's take a look at the defense in this match. And I really want you to focus on what 26713 does as defense, because they start to play a lot of defense inside of the main point, because it looks like their front intake is actually broken. And this is an excellent way that 26713 has attempted to fix that. So we can see that intake is clearly not working. And then we also see this ItCan robot 30618 also playing a lot of defense throughout this match. So they're being really careful not to pin each other. And when I say pin, let's go back and take a look at this again. We can see that ItCan is coming in. We look at this white robot in the bottom corner, coming up, give it a nice good push as they're moving around. And being really careful not to hold the robot down for more than 3 seconds. Because every 3 seconds, at least as of the time of this recording, is a 5-second penalty. Now, 26713 does a good job right there of pushing 30618 out of the way as 30618 is trying to score their artifacts into the net. That's a great way of playing defense, particularly if, as their robot is, they have run out of the ability to actually intake balls. Now, one thing I do wonder is if they could have gone back to the human player to be able to come up and grab. But Team 26713 is doing an excellent job with this defense here. And I also think that Teams 361A is doing a good job of trying to mitigate some of that defense strategy as well, while also still playing some defense on their own by running into the other robots as they are trying to get those artifacts in. We're going to see a lot of defense in here, and I think this is a good example of some pre-season aggression that I think teams really need to be prepared for. There's going to have to be the ability that your flywheel is probably going to have to pretty quickly adjust to things on the fly. Because even if your flywheel or your robot is capable of turning and rotating towards the target, if someone else comes up and hits you and that flywheel is not capable of rotating back at a fast enough point, a fixed shooter is going to be at a pretty big disadvantage when it comes to this. Because we can see that these are actually pretty impressive scoring robots, but the final score at the end of this match is actually not as high as you would expect. It looks like up to about 60, 70 points. Particularly because there's just so much defense being played. And I think it's really important that as these robots are coming in, not only can they play defense, but they can also come in and score. And I think that's a big one, is your ability to play that defense while also being able to still score in and of yourself and not playing so much defense that you're not able to actually go in and score your own points either. Now, coming up to the end of the match here, this is where you got to be really careful starting to play defense, because ItCan there is running into a big problem where they may have just cost themselves the match, because that's a 30-point swing on the end of that one. And I want you to show that in the last 20 seconds here again. So come take a look at this white robot here you have, and this blue robot is also fouling itself here. So actually Team Blue is doing quite a few fouls in the last 7 seconds here, because you are not allowed to contact the opposing robot during the base section. So it actually looks like they may have lost themselves the match because of that. I'm not sure what the final score is. We can maybe skew ahead, but you're not allowed to touch the opposing robot in their base zone in those last 20 seconds, or what does end up happening is the opponents will get max points and the ranking point for that park. So let's go ahead and see, and it looks like that, well, let's skip forward to see what the score is. This is qualifier match 13. Yeah, there you go. So that actually did mean that red ended up winning because of those foul points and because of those base points we got in. But it looks like blue also fouled in there that I didn't get a chance to actually see, because they also got awarded the full base points when they should not have. So that's really interesting to see. In fact, actually, maybe that it didn't actually end up moving that match at all. Let's see if we can go back to where red fouled in. I didn't get a chance to see that. Let's come into the last 14 seconds. Let's come to the last 20 seconds here. We've got blue coming in. So blue is in the red zone. Red, there we go. So that's where the foul is, because red is now moving into the blue zone. So it actually looked like this white robot may have actually pushed the red robot in. Let's go ahead and watch this white robot as we get towards this red robot as it tries to push it into its own base zone. So we shall see here as we're in our last 20 seconds. Let's watch this white robot. And no, it looks like red just probably put itself in a really unadvantageous point, but it was a really smart play, if it was intentional, from this white robot to be able to move itself into that base zone there. When those last 20 seconds come up for that steam whistle, get out of dodge, get out of that base zone, because you will give the other team 30 points if you're in there. Not a great strategy. Not only is it 30 points, it's also a full ranking point for that base, so stay away from that base zone. If you'd like access to some of the different CAD files and code snippets from my various tutorials, you can consider joining the robotics community down below. I'm curious how your team is doing this season. If you want to submit your robot, there's also an FTC Fridays video. You can let me know about cool matches, interesting plays or different things you want me to analyze. You can also submit those in the FTC Fridays. And as always, best of luck out there this season.